Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of FTT Chats. I'm Lisa Moyle, Director of Strategy at VC Innovations, and today I'm really delighted to be joined by Matt Cockayne. Matt is Chief Commercial Officer with Yapily. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Lisa, and thank you for having me on this today. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. So, Matt, I'd love to start with a question around open banking and payments. I know that you often describe open payments as the gateway to open banking. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure, absolutely. I think if you kind of step back to when open banking went live just over 2 years ago, it was very much about the data side, so the transaction side, kind of PFM, lending, accounting, those type of solutions. And those are really important still, but the proportion of people who are going to use those is a much smaller kind of subset of those that will use a payments piece. So really, as the consent journey is very similar for both sharing your data, but also making a payment through open banking, actually getting people engaged with that payment journey and the kind of the screens that you go through and how you authenticate is really, so that's kind of why we say it's the gateway to open banking and open finance, because payments is much more digestible for someone to engage. They want to make a payment for something that's very simple, especially if they're on a mobile, so they can do the app-to-app journey. It's a very simple engagement method to go through that, but it then builds confidence. So that then if they want to get that next step and use a PFM solution or share their data for a lending decision, whether that's for a mortgage or a personal loan, they've actually already seen that flow and they're comfortable with that journey because they've seen it work on a payments piece, rather than seeing it as the first time and go, oh, I don't really want to share my data. I don't want to do this, because there's still a bit of lack of awareness about what open finance is, what open banking is. And I know we talk about those terms, but really it's not about, for the average consumer or average business, it's not about open banking, it's about what are the propositions that are being powered by it. And so payments is a really good use case for that, generally, especially for a business side, because it's a cheaper and faster way for them to receive money, typically, than any other existing methods that exist today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So on the provider side, they're getting some immediate benefit. And on the user customer side, they're becoming more familiar with what it is and this whole notion of sharing their data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at some of the other legislation that's coming in around paying by card for online transactions, there's this thing called secure customer authentication that in the UK has been delayed, but until next summer. But in the rest of the EU goes live on 31st of December. What that means is that actually paying by card for anything over 30 euros is going to have a multi-factor authentication journey built into it. So it's actually going to make it far more problematic to go through a card journey. And that might mean that you have to have a phone call, you get a text, you get an email. If you go through that journey on an open banking journey, that multi-factor authentication is built into the journey. So when you authenticate on your mobile app, you're already going through a biometric authentication process, which means actually that an open banking payment is going to be a quicker and smoother journey, which I think in this kind of, as we're in a recession and as companies try to come out of it, being able to not have drop off on that kind of that final piece of the checkout, whether it's buying something on an Amazon e-commerce site or whether it's actually paying a business invoice, I think that's much more important and it's going to become a bit of a differentiator on actually driving the adoption of this. And if I look at kind of our customer base, it's very much pushing. We're seeing a lot of people looking to use payments capability both in Q4 this year and then moving into next year as that comes in, because they see the changes that are coming and they want to offer their end users a smooth and easy journey.
And picking up on that kind of gateway notion, can you give us a little sense of why open finance, open banking is no longer a nice to have, but a need to have?
I think it's one of those things that probably 2-3 years ago was in massive hype mode. Everyone thought it would be the panacea to save financial services, which is not, but it is fundamentally a transformational capability that financial services is going through. And if you look at the rise of kind of embedded finance and kind of non-financial services companies wanting to offer financial services products, open banking is fundamental to that and is really a core component of that embedded finance journey. Whether you're talking about like banking as a service, whether you're talking about open finance, whether you're talking about another service, what the piece that powers that all is an open API capability and actually as a business or a consumer being able to make instant payments or be able to share your data to get better products. So I think we've gone past that kind of massive hype cycle. We're now in the place where it's gone past in compliance mode. So the banks are pretty much compliant with it. They have APIs that work across Europe. Some countries maybe not so fully, but generally it's fully deployed now. And it's now about, okay, if you're not doing something here, you are losing out compared to your competition, because we've gone past that kind of, yeah, this looks interesting. Yeah, I might do a PFM. It's actually now, actually, I need to be offering this capability to my customers because lots of other people are. And if I don't, I'm going to be missing out. And I think in the era of kind of, I think we've moved past that fast follower method where you have kind of a couple of early adopters and it was okay to come a couple of years later. That's just not true anymore. The rate of disruption and the rate of transformation, I think COVID has really accelerated that in personal finance and in business finance offerings is really picking up speed. And if you don't have this capability in your offerings, you're going to lose your customers to other people that do. And we're seeing that particularly in kind of people who offer card payment platforms. Open finance will actually, and open banking payments will actually cannibalize their revenue to some extent. But if they don't do it, they'll have no revenue because their customers will move to other platforms. So it's kind of, that's I think why it's gone past, oh, this is a nice shiny thing. Oh, it's a bit of new tech. Yeah, let's look at it. Let's put it in an innovation lab. It's now, no, this is a production ready service that lots of companies are rolling out across Europe. I mean, if you look at some of the people we're working with, IBM, American Express, Intuit, people like that, they are big corporates who are rolling this capability out across Europe. So I think we've gone past that kind of, it's just small fintechs who are having a nice play with this shiny new bauble. It's very much, this is a production corporate system that is now needs to be deployed in your solutions. Otherwise, you're going to lose your customers to people who are doing it.
Yeah, and picking up on that point around delivering those benefits, you know, and that it's no longer a choice, it's part of the competitive infrastructure. Looking at some specific sectors, e-commerce, hospitality, travel, you know, you touched on card payments there. What are some of the immediate benefits that you can bring to those particular sectors?
So I think there's kind of two or three that really stand out immediately. The first one is around a typical payment journey at the moment will run on a percentage of transaction fee. There's a lot of steps that sit in that, whether the acquirer, the issuer, the point of sale terminal. There's a lot of people that sit in that journey, and they're all taking their slice because they all provide a different service. An open banking payment is a much simpler payment. What that means is then it's generally much, much cheaper for people who are then receiving that money as part of that journey. There's a few nuances in there as to where it might not work, but generally, if you're receiving funds through card networks at the moment, an open banking journey will be somewhere between 75 and 95% cheaper for you as the receiver of that cash. I think in this time where cost reduction is a critical component for most businesses as they're trying to survive and potentially thrive, post-COVID, as we're coming out of, as we kind of go through this recession and then come out the other side, this is a critical piece that will actually help them potentially save headcount and actually offer cheaper solutions maybe to their end customers because they're not having to go through that. I think then you talk about reconciliation. So today, reconciliation is a pain generally. There's a lot of manual work that goes through it. If someone's offering like a bank transfer solution for you to pay, you've got to log into your online banking. You've got to put in the payee's details. You've got to put in the reference number. There's a lot of manual piece that can go wrong there. If you do that through an open banking payment, you'll get a unique identifier that you can then reference as that money hits your account, and you can automatically reconcile that. So I think when you look at those two pieces, it's really quite important. And then if you talk about hospitality, there's then this massive move that's been accelerated to contactless payments. People paying with their phone, paying with a contactless card. I mean, in the London bubble, it's kind of been standard for us, but I think that's now spread out to the rest of the UK and across Europe. When you look at some of the stats that market research has shown on this. But if you can pay that by your mobile doing an open banking payment, why wouldn't you? So I think it also offers that capability, whether that's as an e-commerce transaction or online transaction, or whether it's in a point of sale transaction. It's available there for you to have this to work.
Those are some really compelling use cases. And Matt, you and your colleagues will be joining us for FinTech Talent's virtual Open Finance next month. And I know you touched upon this earlier in your remarks, that there's still a big education piece out there, yet not much time to bridge that gap between you and your competitors. What are some quick wins that you could outline or point to in using open finance, open banking?
So I think if we look today, where is the real traction occurring? It's kind of payments kind of sits across a whole load of that. Within that, there's a few specific use cases that I think are really, really valuable. The first one is kind of funding an e-wallet or a trading account or kind of a wealth management solution. Typically, those are done by bank transfers. There's a lot of reconciliation on the back end. We worked with Money Farm, and they saw 3 weeks after launching open banking's payment option that there were already a third of payments going through, of money being deposited into their account was going through an open banking journey. It's quicker, it's simpler, and customers are just buying into it. And they're expecting to see significant increase in kind of adoption as that solution gets more embedded into their processes. I think the second one is around the payments piece that we've talked about how do you offer cheaper, easier payments. So we work with a lot of payments companies who are really deploying this as another payments rail that sits within their suite. So they'll still offer card, direct debit, those type of things. But actually offering open banking as a piece there, I think it's becoming more important as more and more transactions become mobile first. Open banking is absolutely designed for that. So I think that's the piece. And then it's around how do we start using identity? So we've talked mainly about payments. How do we start using identity from the AIS data, so from the transaction data, both for kind of reducing fraud, but also for verifying that someone is who they say they are, for whatever kind of product they want to sign up for. So there's a real use case there. And as we see banks kind of looking at how can they actually start to monetize open banking, I think there's a real identity use case that they could really go after if they really want to, because at the end of the day, the bank knows a lot about an individual, whether that's an individual person or whether it's an individual firm. And they could really own that identity. I know there's lots of separate conversations about digital identity, but using open banking is a real piece there. So I think if you talk about quick wins, those are the quickest ones that sit there. And then when we talk about kind of this financial crisis that we're in and lending, actually being able to share your data through an open banking journey to be able to get funds quickly, whether you're a business or whether you're an individual, I think is going to become more and more important as people start to struggle financially and require additional funding to help see them through this crisis.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point and a potential use case that will have a real impact. Thank you so much for your time today, Matt. Not only did you pick up on some of the key issues that we'll be covering at Open Finance, including identity. So we really look forward to hearing more from you and your colleagues next month at the event. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Looking forward to next month's event as well.